Hey guys, Tammy here. And in this video, we're going to talk about when the narcissist is lying about your level of involvement with the children. Okay. So like when they're minimizing or, you've kind of been present and there and participative the whole time. And they're just kind of like, oh no, this parent was gone out to lunch, not doing anything. And you're like, what? Who are they talking about? Right? It's that kind of thing. And, this actually happens. I mean, because narcissists, by nature of the way they move through their world, they're very dismissive of other people. And so that's what this is part of. The reason that they're painting this picture of you not being around and not being involved, because it's just more of being dismissive of you as a person and of your value as a parent. Let me just remind you, if you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe to the channel if you like the content so that you get notified as new videos are released. And please, as always, share this on social media because so many people need this help. And the more you guys share, the more people can find the help that they're looking for. When you are up against a narcissistic person and they're in that mode where they just want to be dismissive of you and act like, you weren't around and you didn't do all these things, this is the point, I think, where a lot of times I'll start to hear from people. And this is why I always tell you guys, like, the sooner you can start with some of the strategies that I try to share with you, the better off you'll be. Because I tend to get eyeballs or have people's attention when they hit a point where they're ready to go to court, right? But all the things in between, we're just kind of coasting and we're not really paying attention during that time. You pay attention when it starts to hit a crisis point. But the problem is that sometimes when it hits a crisis point, it's too late. I mean, I don't like to say too late. It's harder, right? When it hits a crisis point, you haven't been doing anything. It's harder. It's sort of like if we procrastinate on our work and our desk is covered, but we're not doing anything, it'll eventually hit a crisis point, right? And then you're going to be sitting at your desk at 2 a.m. crying because you have hours and hours of work to do. This is the same kind of thing. It builds up and you need to be taking the appropriate steps and documenting throughout this whole process. Look, if you have a narcissistic person on the other side, I'm just going to tell you from day one, you need to be documenting and taking certain steps. And if you're on day 500 or 1,000 or whatever day you're on and you haven't been doing this, you need to start right now. If I'm being accused of not having been involved and the other parent is being dismissive, then how can I show that I was involved? Well, one of the things that I can do is I can have a calendar of all the different things I attend. I can have a document log of all the different significant incidences that have happened that I have written down about. Like if the other parent's withholding time, right? I see parents do that a lot of times. One parent will withhold and then they'll say, oh, well, the other parent doesn't see their kid. Well, yeah, because you're withholding, right? But you're not going to remember, if you go into court and the court says, well, a year ago, during this period, the other parent's claiming you didn't see the child for 2 weeks. Is that true? You might be like, I think so. I'm not sure. Well, why didn't you see the child for that 2-week period? Well, I don't know. I don't recall. That's not as convincing as, Your Honor, yes, I do recall that because I have this calendar that I keep and I have in my notes that during that 2-week period, Dad was actually withholding the child. And on that Wednesday, I actually did contact the police and make a report. And here's a copy of the report, right? The problem is a year later, you're not going to remember that. And narcissists have this way of going in and bringing up these old pieces. And if, you guys, you already know, I know before this even leaves my mouth that you guys are going to know what I'm talking about, because what they always do, they always do. And I hate using the word always, but they do. They take this little kernel of truth, right? And they completely twist it and mold it into something that it totally isn't, like accusing you of not being involved when you actually were. I would want a calendar. I just, what I did when my kids were young, and, thankfully this is probably the one good piece of advice that the attorney I had gave me. And she said, keep a log of everything, because you never know when you're going to need it. And so I went into Outlook and I just created a separate Outlook calendar that was solely for tracking all the things of the kids. And I put on there every time we had a doctor's appointment, every time I took them to a dentist appointment, every time dad didn't show up for his parenting, every time I registered somebody for school, every time, whatever it was, I kept that on a calendar. And then I had a little note section where I would write in detail. And I always tell you guys, date, time, details that make it credible. Because if I can go into the court and I can say, look, on Wednesday, July 25th, I went and I took the child to this appointment and I did this, I did that. And the appointment was at 3 p.m., and we saw this doctor and blah, 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 blah. If I can recite the date and time and those types of details, then that automatically becomes credible. It becomes believable because I have specifics. I'm not just talking in general and saying, well, yeah, I'm always at the doctor's appointments. That's just not as believable. You want to make sure that you're doing things to help yourself. And again, the reason all of this, I always say the case is won and lost in the in-between stuff. The case is not won and lost at the point of crisis where you're going into court, but that's usually when people take action. And that point of crisis would be very, very easy to navigate if you were doing all of the things that you need to do in the day-to-day, which is keeping track of these different things, keeping your document log. If I have something like a police report, I'll go in and when I make my notes, I have a date, time, I'll make the note. I usually assign a category. I tell people have 4 or 5 different key categories. That way you can sort by category if you want to look at issues around one specific topic like school or transitions or whatever it is. And then I make my notes about what happened. And then I cross-reference anything, made a police report on such and such date. So that then if that comes up later in the court, you can actually go back, look at your log and go, oh, wow, I made a police report. Let me go back and get that. You have to be organized and you have to be a little bit detail oriented, because what narcissists count on when they start accusing you of things like this, and say you're not involved with the kids or are dismissive of your role or whatever, they're trying to bait you into an emotional response, because that's an arena they feel like they can win in, right? They're used to being charismatic, right? How many times do I talk to a client and they say, oh, well, I'm just afraid they're going to go in and charm everybody and everybody's going to believe them because everybody always does. This is what you guys say to me all the time when I talk to you. And it's true. I've had this experience myself with my ex-husband where he just goes in and he flies by the seat of his pants and he just talks his way, master manipulates through whatever the situation is. So if they can pull you into that emotional arena and make you reactive, what? It's not true that I'm not involved. I'm there all the time. I go to all the doctor's appointments. I was at school. That type of presentation is not going to help you, is not going to make you seem believable. It's going to make you seem emotional and reactive. And particularly if you're self-represented and you're trying to present this kind of information, or you're talking to a custody evaluator or some third-party expert where you're presenting in that way. You really want to be grounded and you want to know your facts, because instead of, dropping into that emotional reaction, then you're able to come in and be calm because the facts are on your side. You're able to present concise, factual information, and you've got your documents of it. You have to understand that your written log, that is evidence. It's evidence that you created, but it's still evidence to the court. I think a lot of times people get hung up and think, oh, well, I need some outside third party piece of paper to actually be evidence. No, your record keeping, your recollection, and your narrative is also evidence. Usually, evidence that's related to your recollection and your narrative, the problem becomes credibility with that evidence. And the way that you build that credibility is by being calm, being factual, having that detail orientation, so that if you are accused of something like, oh, you haven't been involved, it's like, really? Well, here's my log of all the appointments I've been to for the last 3 years. And the thing is, the narcissist isn't going to expect you to have that kind of evidence because they're used to just throwing accusations out there, you caving in emotionally, and then them being able to manipulate however they want. This is how you start to help yourself. If you are in this crisis point and you haven't been doing the documentation, I would encourage you to start now and to go back as far as you possibly can and try to recreate what you currently remember, because memories around specific incidences just fade, especially when you have a lot of them. If you have a very difficult person on the other side, the sharpness of those incidences are going to fade over time. And so you want to go back and recreate as many of them or as much as you can, and then be diligent from this point forward, because again, you don't know which of these things are going to be the things that come up in court that they are nitpicking about. Okay. So if you'd like to learn more about my coaching services and how I might be able to help you in your custody situation, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's a link on that page that will let you book a time to talk to one of my staff so that you can learn more about my services and find out how I might be able to support you. Talk to you guys next time.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands.